It was a crisp Monday morning in downtown Atlanta. The sun had just begun to rise above the skyline, casting golden reflections on the glass towers of the financial district. Businessmen rushed through the revolving doors of polished buildings, clutching coffee cups and briefcases, lost in their routines. Among them walked Marcus Bennett, a well-dressed black man in his early 40s. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, leather briefcase in hand, and a calm, confident expression on his face. Everything about him radiated professionalism and quiet authority. As he approached the entrance to Larkridge Corporate Tower, he caught the eye of a middle-aged white woman standing near the doors. She wore expensive-looking clothes, carried a designer purse, and had the distinct air of someone used to being in charge, or at least believing she was. She narrowed her eyes the moment she saw Marcus. Without hesitation, she stepped in front of him. "Excuse me," she said sharply, blocking his path. "Can I help you?" "This building isn't open to the public." Marcus stopped, confused but polite. "No, thank you. I'm heading upstairs." She scoffed. "I'm sorry, but this building is for employees only. You can't just walk in here off the street." "I am an employee," Marcus replied calmly, trying not to escalate the situation. "Actually, But she cut him off. "You don't look familiar. Which department are you from? Do you even have ID?" A few people nearby began to glance over. Some watched with interest. Others rolled their eyes, already sensing where this was going, a scene all too familiar in America. A black man dressed like a professional, still being treated like a trespasser. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, but the woman snapped, "No, no, I'm calling security. You need to step aside right now." Her voice grew louder. Passers-by slowed down. Phones discreetly started recording. But no one stepped in. No one said a word. Marcus lowered his hand, resisting the wave of frustration building inside him. He had seen this happen to other people. Now it was happening to him. Not because he was suspicious, not because he was doing anything wrong, but simply because he was a black man in a nice suit, in the wrong place according to her. He looked up at the building, his building, and sighed. The story was just beginning. Security arrived fast. 2 white guards stepped out of the elevator, walking briskly toward the entrance. Their expressions were already set. Serious, suspicious. The woman flagged them down, practically waving like she'd just uncovered a criminal. "There he is," she said, pointing at Marcus. "He tried to enter without clearance. I don't think he belongs here." The taller guard, name tag reading J. Miles nodded curtly and turned to Marcus. "Sir, we're going to need to see some ID." Marcus stayed composed. "I have it. But before we go any further, I think there's been—" "Just show us the ID," the second guard snapped. "We don't need the speech." More people gathered now, lingering just outside the glass doors. Some were workers from the building. Others were passers-by, pulled in by the rising tension. Phones were recording. Eyes were judging. But no one was speaking up. Marcus slowly pulled out his wallet, holding his company-issued ID between 2 fingers. He extended it toward the guards. But before they could even look, the woman scoffed, arms crossed tightly. "You people always try this. Dress up like you belong. It's pathetic." Marcus flinched internally at the phrase, "You people." He was used to coded language, microaggressions. But this? This wasn't subtle. This was bold, open prejudice. One of the guards took the badge and scanned it with a handheld device. His brow furrowed. He glanced at the screen, then looked up at Marcus. His face changed, subtly, a flicker of discomfort. One moment," the guard mumbled, stepping aside with his partner. The woman stood confidently, smiling smugly, like she had just done her civic duty. She leaned toward Marcus with a sneer. "You might have fooled them with the suit, but I've worked here for 12 years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't." Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. He knew what was coming. He could already see the shift happening behind the guard's eyes. The screen had told them something they weren't prepared for, something that didn't match the story they'd assumed. The tall guard looked back at Marcus, and now his posture wasn't firm anymore. It was cautious, respectful, almost fearful. The woman, still basking in her imagined victory, hadn't noticed the change at all. She was about to. The taller security guard cleared his throat and walked slowly back toward Marcus. His partner followed, holding the scanned ID in one hand, as if it were something fragile. The shift in their body language was obvious now. Their confidence had cracked. But the woman still hadn't noticed. "Well," she demanded, "are you going to escort him out or not?" The guard opened his mouth, then hesitated. He glanced again at Marcus, then at the woman. "Ma'am," he began, his voice suddenly careful, "we need to ask you to step aside." She blinked. "What?" "You need to step back," the second guard added, this time with a little more edge. "Now." Confused and slightly offended, she stepped away from Marcus, but folded her arms tighter. "What is this? He's the one who doesn't belong here. Why are you—" "Ma'am," the taller guard interrupted, his tone firmer now. "You've made a mistake." The woman's face tightened. "Excuse me?" "This man," the guard said, gesturing to Marcus with a subtle nod, "is not only an employee here, he's the new chief executive officer of the Larkridge Group." Silence. Dead silence. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear the buzz of a phone vibrating in someone's pocket. The woman's expression collapsed into something between confusion and disbelief. "What?" she whispered, her voice cracking. That can't be right." But her sentence died in her throat. Marcus finally spoke, voice low and steady. "Yes, that's right. I'm Marcus Bennett. I started this week." He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there, a man who had just been publicly profiled, insulted, and humiliated, now forced to introduce himself to people who had already made up their minds about who he was. The guards took a respectful step back, almost subconsciously trying to repair the damage. But it was too late. The crowd that had gathered was no longer watching Marcus. They were watching her. The smugness was gone. Her jaw clenched. She looked around, eyes darting, searching for someone to back her up. No one spoke. Everyone had seen what happened, and the cameras were still rolling. The woman stood frozen. Her face, moments ago so sure of itself, was now blank, drained of color. She looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would come to her defense. But all she saw were silent stares and recording phones. For the first time that morning, Marcus stepped forward. Not aggressively, not with anger, but with unmistakable presence. He turned to the two guards, his voice still calm. "I appreciate you doing your job, but this situation never should have gotten this far." The guards nodded silently, clearly uncomfortable. They had the look of men who had seen too much and realized it too late. Then Marcus turned to the woman. She instinctively took a step back. "I've been in corporate America for over 20 years, Marcus said. "I've built companies, led teams. I've mentored people who now run entire divisions in Fortune 500 firms." She said nothing. Marcus continued. "But none of that mattered to you the moment you saw me walk through those doors." The words hit hard, not just for her, but for everyone watching. You didn't ask questions. You didn't show concern. You showed contempt. The woman's lips trembled. I didn't mean—" "But you did," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. "You meant every word. That's what makes this moment real. That's why it matters." The security guards stood behind him now, literally and symbolically. The onlookers didn't move, didn't speak. They were listening, learning. Marcus took a breath. "You see, this isn't just about me. It's about every young black man or woman who walks into a room and is immediately treated like a threat instead of a peer. It's about how quickly people jump to judgment, how confident they are when they do it, and how often they're wrong." He paused. "I'm not here to shame you," he said, looking directly at her. "I'm here to show you the truth, because until people like you recognize what this is, it won't stop." The woman's eyes welled up, with guilt or fear, or both. Marcus nodded once, then turned and walked through the glass doors of the tower. Not a single person tried to stop him this time. This time, they opened the door for him, literally and figuratively. The glass doors closed behind Marcus with a soft hiss. He didn't look back. Inside the lobby of Larkridge Corporate Tower, employees parted as he passed, whispering to each other, eyes wide. News spread fast in places like this, especially when phones were still warm from recording. But outside, the silence was heavier than ever. The woman, the one who just minutes ago stood like a gatekeeper, now looked small. She clutched her bag to her chest, blinking rapidly, her face flushed with humiliation. One of the guards stepped forward, as if to say something, then thought better of it. The other simply muttered, "He's right," under his breath. The crowd, slowly beginning to disperse, walked away quietly. There were no cheers, no applause, just an uncomfortable stillness, the kind that lingers after a mirror is held up too close and too long. Some people looked down, ashamed. Others glanced back at the woman with a mixture of pity and contempt. She wasn't just embarrassed. She had been exposed, not just for what she said, but for what she assumed, and the world had seen it. One young intern, maybe in his early 20s, stayed behind longer than most. He had watched everything, phone in hand, but hadn't recorded. He had just watched. He looked at the woman, then at the security guards. "I've read about this kind of thing," he said quietly, mostly to himself, "but I've never actually seen it happen like that." One of the guards let out a breath. "It happens more than you'd think." The woman turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete like punctuation marks to her silence. No one stopped her. No one followed. Back inside, the elevator carried Marcus upward, floor after floor, toward the executive suite. He stood tall, briefcase in hand, heart heavy, but steady. He had said what needed to be said, but he knew the real work was only just beginning. Marcus stepped off the elevator into the executive floor of the Larkridge Corporate Tower. Glass walls, minimalist decor, modern art on the walls. It looked like the future, but what happened downstairs had reminded him. The future still carried the weight of the past. Inside the boardroom, a senior leadership meeting was already underway. All white faces turned as the new CEO walked in. A few stood to greet him. Others stayed seated, unsure. Word had already reached them. Text messages, Slack notifications, whispered warnings. He was harassed downstairs. Security didn't recognize him. It was bad. Marcus placed his briefcase on the table and remained standing. "I know we had an agenda today," he began, "but something happened this morning that needs to come first." The room shifted. Chairs squeaked. One executive cleared his throat. Marcus looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. "I was stopped at the front door of this building, interrogated, insulted, accused of trespassing, all before I could say my name." A few people averted their eyes. But what hurt more, Marcus continued, wasn't the insult. It was how normal it felt. How practiced the woman was in her judgment. How easy it was for the guards to believe her. How no one watching said a word. He paused. This wasn't about one woman, or two guards. It was about a culture, the one we're all responsible for, including me. Starting today, a long silence followed. Then he stepped closer to the glass wall, where the city buzzed far below. "I didn't take this job just to manage profits. I came here to shape a company that sees people fully, not through the lens of race, status, or stereotype." He turned back to the room. "That means mandatory bias training, immediate revision of our security protocols, transparent hiring practices, mentorship programs for underrepresented employees, and quarterly accountability reports. Not just numbers, but narratives." One executive, older and red-faced, finally spoke. "Marcus, I think we all agree that what happened was unfortunate. But do you really think it's our job to fix society's problems?" Marcus smiled softly, not with sarcasm, but with certainty. "No," he replied, "but it's absolutely our job not to repeat them." The room was quiet again, but this time, not out of shame, out of understanding. Something had shifted. The message was clear. This was no longer just a company. It was a platform. And Marcus intended to use it. Weeks passed. The video from that morning at the tower entrance had gone viral, not because of violence or drama or shouting, but because of dignity, because of how Marcus Bennett had responded with grace, strength, and truth. News anchors debated it, podcasts quoted it. Young black professionals posted it with captions like, "We've all been Marcus." This hit me hard. This is how you lead. But Marcus wasn't chasing attention. He was chasing impact. And it was working. Inside Larkridge Tower, everything began to change. Security guards now went through training, not just on procedures, but on perception. Posters appeared in the break rooms with messages like, "See the person, not the profile." Leadership doesn't always look the way you expect. Marcus launched a mentorship program, pairing black interns with executives who once never imagined themselves doing such a thing. The culture started to shift. People talked differently, listened differently. The woman from the front door incident? She never came back. But her absence wasn't the story. The story was in the quiet moments. A white executive apologizing privately to a young black assistant, a receptionist catching herself before assuming a guest wasn't supposed to be there, a security guard now pausing, asking before accusing. One morning, Marcus walked into the lobby again. Same building, same glass doors. But this time, the young man at the front desk, maybe 22, Latino, new hire, stood up immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," he said with a smile. "Welcome back." Marcus nodded. "Thank you. It's good to be back." He turned, looked around the lobby. People weren't just seeing him. They were seeing each other. And for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, he felt like he truly belonged. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because someone had stood still long enough to make it start.